You ready? 5, 4, 3. Hello, welcome back to Soulful Synthesis. This will be episode 4. We actually have a very special episode tonight because we are joined finally by Mr. Michael. I mentioned him last episode, and lo and behold, we're here day after, actually, rather on a spontaneous episode adventure. Michael is, among many things, a spiritual being, an amazing soul, very open, very loving, very kind, very expressive. He cuts the shit with people, which I love. And he is my life partner, my soul partner, my, I don't know, every other type of partner, best friend. He is an avid reader, wonderful friend, and a beautiful person to be around. And so we have him here tonight. Michael, would you like to say hi?
I'm honored to be here.
Yay. So actually, why this episode is rather spontaneous is because he and I last night were having a conversation about time. Time is something that keeps popping up here and there, and I don't believe it's something that's talked about often, but I do feel is important to mention and address. So, and I know it's one of your personal favorites, right?
It is.
So, okay.
On my vision board, I have, so at the heart of my vision board, I have a picture of little Michael. And then 5 centimeters down from him, I have Time Traveler. So it's very at my heart.
It's very apropos for describing him and his conversations. So I think one of the first things I want to jump into is how we got into talking about time last night, because we were discussing how we reconcile a past, present, and a future all happening at the same time. No pun intended. So I'm curious, what's your take on, or how do you reconcile a past, present, and a future where people say everything's happening all at once, yet it's also individualized. There's always there's a past, there's a present, but there's also a future that you work towards, yet they're all on the same timeline. I'm curious what your take on that is.
I'm excited. Okay. I gotta get seated properly because we got a big one coming already. So I was reading, as you know, The Power of Now last night. And you know when you're reading a book and there's just this internalization that, or when you're just walking around or speaking with a friend or in the shower, especially in the shower. For me, some of those moments are in airport toilets for some reason. But anyways, when just you realize something, it makes sense, the dots connect. And I had one of those when I was reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Amazing book if you haven't read it. And
I can vouch for that.
He was speaking about, of course, the power of now, how nothing can exist outside of the now. And it just made sense to me because, and it may make sense to you, it may not. I know, like, I could say it made sense to me because I've been thinking about this for three years and then it just clicked. So take it for what it is. But to me, it makes sense. And it did last night. And it was like, if you're in the future, like let's say 2 months from now, you're hoping for something 2 months from now. Let's say you get it 2 months from now. 2 months in the future, where will you be? You will not be in the future. You'll be in the now. In the past, you were living in the single moment that there was, which is the now. Right now, right here, listening to this, you can think about the future, you can think about the past, but you cannot live there physically. And this has been one of the instances where physically, like realizing a limitation has actually helped me understand something spiritual. So since I can't live physically in the past or live physically in the future, then where must I be physically in the present? So then where am I energetically in the present? And why? Because in order for you to be physically somewhere, first you need to be energetically there. So since I can't physically be anywhere else, the only place I am energetically is there, which is the present.
So I love that. So then how do you then reconcile having these future dreams if you're speaking about energetically and physically being in a now state, which is really all you can be? How do you think about, well, I have these future goals, these future dreams, and they're not for now, they're for then, or they're for forward then. So what do you do with that?
So I wish someone told me this. So before I answer that, I will say to be mindful of, you want to use your future dreams to empower you and to excite you, but not as a subtle jail or prison of I will only be happier when this happens.
An if then mentality, you mean?
Yes. Or
And
if
by the
then or
way,
when then.
to clarify, if then or when then mentality is putting something in a lockbox of or making it a conditional statement. So I will be happy when I have $1 million is a if then or when then statement, and those are very tricky places to be in because you're making your happiness or you're putting a condition on something for your future. I just wanted to chime in and say that in case and any of you are not familiar with this if then when then mentality.
There is one more layer too.
Oh.
And I don't know if I've ever labeled it, but if wherever you are now, and if you're, oh God, this may be easier for some to understand than others, but wherever you are now, if you don't like it, oh no. If you feel some form of conflict or fear, you're not being fully present. But anyways, if you're living in the future, in terms of like using your thoughts for the future, like you have a goal 2 years from now, 2 months, you have a vision, a dream, there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually you using your mind properly. But where there begins to become something wrong with it is when not I will only be happy if this happens 2 months from now. It's if you look at that in the future and then compare it to where you are now and then feel discontent. Because then you're not using your imagination. Your imagination's using you and it's ruining you. And that's not what's supposed to happen.
So you're suggesting to use those future dreams and goals to empower and inspire your now actions to get there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the same of comparing yourself to people. Like if you look at them and you're inspired, you're doing it right. If you look at them and you're depressed, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
If you look at your future and you're depressed, you're doing it wrong. I want to answer your question though. So I recently had this internalization that I'll make it so simple because it took me like 5 minutes to explain it to you like 3 weeks ago. If God, creator, source, whatever, whoever you would love to call it, if you believe in it, created humans with a heart and a mind, both of which are all powerful and are supposed to be working together, then it would be rightful to presume that this God, this creator, this source wants human beings to use them both together. So our heart is like pretty much our intuition. It's how we connect with our feelings. It's our healer. Our mind is supposed to be used with the core intention that we are not our mind. So the way we use our mind, one of the main ways is to say, I see something that is not yet physically seeable. I want to make this physically seeable. So I'm going to use my knowledge, my intelligence, the lessons I learned from wherever I had learned from in my life. And I'm going to make this and take this from my mind and build it into physical reality. So the core lesson there is you're supposed to use your mind without letting it use you. And I made the mistake for so long of getting so attached to my future. I was living there. You don't want to be living there. You want to be using it or building it, but not living how do I say it?
Like using your mind to help you shape those dreams and those actionable steps for now without staying in that future state always.
Yeah, the simple answer at the end of the day is you want to use your mind and not let it use you.
Okay, but then how do you reconcile that feeling then? You know, I think Dr. Joe talks about this. Dr. Joe Dispenza, an incredible human being who speaks a lot about heart and mind and body coherence, especially with drawing your future to your presence. So I think based on what you're saying, I feel a little bit mixed because there's this layer of you're not supposed to be living necessarily in your future because then you're not in a present state. However, drawing your future to your presence requires you to feel and be in a state of wherever your future is. I think for Dr. Joe, though, and we've talked about this briefly, he's referring to experiencing a feeling and an emotion that a future you would be experiencing or feeling. However, what's your take on drawing that future to you without necessarily staying there?
So there's so many layers I want to get into. Oh my god. I used to have this quote on my laptop that was, I'm gonna paraphrase it: the greatest composer does not sit down to compose when he is inspired, but he sits down to compose and becomes inspired. So I am someone who usually, like, you don't depend on luck to succeed. You get luck the more work you put in, which is why luck helps you succeed. But to depend on luck, you won't succeed. So I don't depend on feeling something and then thinking after I'm feeling. I think first and then I feel second. When the feeling comes first, I'm grateful. It's like when you get inspired, you're grateful, but you know for a fact you're not always going to feel inspired to do something. That's why courage exists. So I think myself, I'm like, what does Michael in the future, from like in the future 2 years, think? And I think how he does. And then after I'm thinking how he thinks, I'm feeling how he feels. And I'm doing so with, this is the key word here, certainty, so that I don't need to be like, oh, am I doing this right? And then living in fear and then not being present and being attached to my future. But since I'm certain that I know how future Michael thinks, I know how future Michael feels, it's like once I make that connection, bang, I can go right back to the present. I'm no longer living as current Michael because I'm thinking and feeling how future Michael thinks without living in the future. I'm essentially living in the present, but I'm living from the future.
Living in the present with the future thoughts. So for you, thoughts precede
thoughts.
Anything else?
Feelings, just like luck, I'll say feelings are luck. Like you're not always going to feel, you can't just wake up and be like, I hope I feel happy.
Right.
And wait to feel happy.
Well, there are things you can do to experience that feeling.
So you have to be the one who creates it. Right. Not always, but to depend on, like, I will wait for the rest of my life to feel happy, you're going to be miserable. But there will be times when you just, like, something happens unexpected, like friend sends you a text saying how much they appreciate you, or, I don't know, like you go out or someone surprises you or whatever it is. Where like that is what I consider luck. That's the feeling. So I do or think feelings come second.
Isn't it that based on, it reminds me of that Tony Robbins quote, it's think yourself into a new way of being or doing? What is it?
Oh, there's so many
quotes. Yourself into,
it's not a Tony Robbins quote. It's
who is it by?
Well, I forget. He actually, there's a book by this. It says, do not try to think yourself into a new way of doing. Do yourself into a new way of thinking.
Okay. So a lot of it is states. But for you, it's thought first that then propels you, it sounds forward into an action or feeling that will come as a result.
Yeah. I was going to say it states first, which is like first and second.
That's kind of like the chicken or the egg, right? Because what precedes state, thought, or vice versa.
For those who don't know, state is not necessarily emotion. It's like the simplest way to illustrate state is think about how it feels to, say, sit up curled in a ball in a corner of a dark room versus being on top of a hill that you just climbed for 2 hours, completely ecstatic with joy looking at the sky. Those are two very different states. And then those states are followed by feelings and thoughts.
Okay. I love this. So I had another question about time that came to me earlier, because I don't think I've ever asked you this, but have you ever practiced speeding up or slowing down time for yourself?
Oh, I wanted to tell you this 2 nights ago, but we didn't get around to it.
Yeah, so, I don't think I've ever asked you this.
So yes. The time, okay, I have manipulated time a lot. I would love to talk about it, but I feel this is more important to talk about because this was, I don't believe in accidents. This was as close to a, quote, accident as you can get without being one. There was a time where I went to BU for 3 years, and this was my sophomore or junior year. I was walking back to my apartment on West Campus, and it was raining out, and I turned on the street, and if you have you seen Now You See Me Too with the rain? Okay,
I don't think so.
it's like
I've seen the first
when
one.
the rain stops and then the rain goes up, and it's this whole illusion. And the rain literally slowed down. It was going at like half, maybe like a third speed, and it was only for like 5 seconds, but it was enough. I was like, wait a minute. And I looked, and then I became aware, and I was like, huh. And I literally saw the rain like change its speed, and it was so cool. And I knew
That's
like time was
amazing.
different there.
That's an amazing experience.
You know.
Which kind of led me to thinking about this. We've talked about it so many times, but I never really asked you what inspired time for you. Because this is it sounds like one of those experiences would have been an inspiration to you, and I know Alan Watts speaks about it a lot, or spoke about it a lot, but I never asked you what was your particular curiosity with time.
I don't know, actually. I really don't know. I can tell you when I first became aware of it, but I
Yes,
don't know
please share.
why I first had a desire to become aware of it. So when I was little, I was like 6, anywhere 5 to 8, probably like 6 or 7. I had this sleeping dream. So same word for dream. I call it sleeping dream okay. I had a sleeping dream of a woman in a green bikini coming from a boat tied next to my father's boat onto my father's boat, and she was walking across where the boats connected. And I was like, okay, whatever. That summer, like 3 months, 2 months, 4 months later, that same exact thing happened. And I was just so like,
in real life?
Yeah.
You were on a vacation and you saw
No,
it?
I wasn't on vacation. I was just in Hull, Massachusetts.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and I saw it, and I was like, what the fuck?
You were on a boat?
Yes, my dad has a boat. He's had a boat since I was a kid.
I think I knew this. I definitely knew this.
And then those just kept happening. I had somewhere I would have a sleeping dream for those. This is called deja vu. I'd have a sleeping dream, and then the sleeping dream would manifest in life. And then I'd have like I call it a daydream during the day that would manifest in life. Mm-hmm. I would have a premonition that would manifest. I could go on and on.
Okay, so on that note of deja vus, what advice would you give to someone whose curiosity is being piqued by time, or wants to try and time manage or control their time or get into a better relationship with time, and explore that realm? What would you?
The one thing I wish I knew. This is what I currently do. I haven't actually, so I could get much better at doing this too. Plant a seed of deja vu in the future. So to be more specific and more practical with that, or actionable, plant a seed plant a knowing that you are going to experience a deja vu in the future. Don't try to see it. Don't try to make it at some place or at some time. Like, I'm going to have a deja vu tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Like, that's
you just create a certainty of something.
Yeah, be like, sometime in my future, I'm going to have a deja vu, and I know that I'm going to have a deja vu, period, and then let it go. Don't fucking like, when's it going to happen?
Of what? Of something particular?
No, just
that you will have
that you're going to have a deja vu.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to probably open people up. Yeah. Yep. So we spoke about this in the last episode, that curiosity is a very beautiful channeler because it unlocks a lot for people the more curious you get about things.
Can I say something about this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Curiosity is your heart tapping on your soul, and it's saying, hey, can you show me what my truths are? The only thing that can get in between your heart and your soul is your ego / your mind being like, nope, it's supposed to be this way. So if your curiosity, if you can get more curious than you are, what's the word I'm looking for? Really, if you can get more curious than fear, if you can build more curiosity than fear, your heart is going to show you probably way more gifts than you or I could ever imagine you have.
So I think one of the things about curiosity and wonder is when you use that phrase that I wonder what it would be like to have a deja vu sometimes in the future. It's a much easier, I found, way of create or planting a seed rather than saying, oh, I'm going to have a deja vu in the future, because it creates an opening where there's a possibility for certainty, where it kind of exists with it without you suffocating it and saying, no, I will have a deja vu in the future, but then there's doubts kind of that go along with it. Does that make sense?
I do. I think I could have taken my, and by the way, they're not just mine. You have it. Everyone has it. I happen to be more in touch with it than certain people, and I'm sure certain people are more in touch with it than I am. I have reached my particular phase in life where I don't need to question if I'm going to have one or not, because I've experienced it so much. So, like, if you're on, like, your path is not yet reached my point, or the point where ours would be equivalent, yes, definitely what Esty said, which is, I wonder what it would be like, or what would it be like, instead of, I know I'm going to have one, and then maybe your mind's like, bullshit, you've never experienced this before, you're lying to yourself.
It creates more of an opening, I found personally, when you say, like, I wonder what it's like, because it's an easier way of letting it go. And I really encourage all of you to try and practice that phrase. I know it's done wonders, no pun intended, for me, also for you as well. And it helps open up that curiosity. And
I love your questions.
This is fun. I love it. I love speaking about time. We had, I think it was 2.5 to 3 hours, I'm sure, the other night of just speaking about past, present, future. And so on that, and we're reaching our marker here, I'm curious if you have any parting thoughts on time to
I have
listeners.
a parting question.
Ooh.
What would you like to know about time?
What would I like to know about time?
I have a question to leave the listeners with, but I'm not going to ask it yet.
From you about time? About your experiences?
From source. I may be able to answer, I may not be. Maybe about your own experiences.
I would love to experience more of a presence with time, because just like how, is it atoms or molecules that when they're observed, they
It's both.
move, but when they're not, they're slow.
It's more of the subatomic particles.
Yeah. So there's this, you can share the science of that.
So there's many experiments. The famous one is called the double slit experiment.
Yeah.
It was essentially scientists fired electrons through this slit and then through two slits, and they observed them, and then they didn't observe them. And they found that when they observed them, they were different than when they didn't observe them. And all that showed, which was a crazy internalization, was that atoms, particles, electrons, therefore everything, because everything's made up. No, not everything, but like everything you can perceive currently is made up of those things, behaves different if you're looking at
Observed versus unobserved.
Okay, if you're observing it, or it will behave different if you're not observing it.
I've definitely experienced that for time myself, so I think that's cool. I think I shared this with you the other day. I was with a family friend, and we parked somewhere at a meter for lunch, and I remember I observed the meter at some time, and we definitely paid it, and it was working. It wasn't flashing red, so it didn't indicate that it was broken or not in use or something like that. And we went to the lunch, and we came back, and I had noticed that it was the same time on the meter. And it took me a second to go, wait a minute, I think that was the same time. And as soon as I said that and I looked at it, the clock went forward a minute. And in that moment, I internalized that exact experiment, that when it's observed, time will move. And if it's not, you're enjoying it. That phrase that everyone knows, oh, pass the time so nicely when you're enjoying it and you're in the moment. So I think the only question I really have is, I think I'm asking this of source in general, is for me to experience more of time as it is now in every moment, being more present.
I have a not conflicting, I have a counter argument.
Ooh, okay.
For you to experience more time,
More nowness, I think.
It's actually less time, because if you're experiencing more time, you'd be observing it, and you don't want to be observing it.
I think more, it's not really than a time thing. It's more, well, it is.
Timelessness.
Right. I think experiencing life in a present state, which is now, which is going to enhance and expand my time, I feel.
I will say, being in that internalization I shared at the beginning has, and I have such a strong feeling that nothing can happen outside of now. The way I saw it is like Abraham Hicks talks about this. There's a vortex in that, like, imagine like you're walking in a storm where there's just like sand behind you, sand to the right of you, sand to the left of you, and sand in front of you. But like a hurricane, you are the eye of the storm, and the you that you are is presence. So everything around you is mumbo jumbo because it doesn't exist. But if you walk straight, your future walks straight with you. Your past walks straight with you. Because no matter where you go, left, right, straight, up, down, wherever, you are still and will always be the eye of the storm. Always.
That's a beautiful analogy.
That's presence.
I love that.
I have a thought for you, question for you, and obviously your audience.
Is it rhetorical?
You can answer it.
For us all. Okay, fire away.
Who are you without time?
I'm going to need to ponder that one. That's a great question. I like that. He is also a mastermind of questions, in case that was not part of the introduction. But alas, is that the parting thought?
It is.
Question? I love that. Well, we thank you so much for being here. In case we didn't specify this in the beginning, take what resonates and leave what does not. This conversation is very much inspired by lots of different conversations and thoughts and feelings and intuitions and insights. So if anything confuses you or excites you, inspires you, or you simply have a curiosity on, please feel free to reach out to Michael or myself. I will link his Instagram bio in the show notes, as well as I think all of you at this point should have my email. And we hope to be back having another amazing conversation together on Soulful Synthesis. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And we'll see you all next time.